My name is Jim. We're going to run through a typical Vinyasa level yoga class here, kind of breaking down some of the poses that you might hear in class. Start with mountain pose. Your feet are hip width distance apart, gripping into the floor. Some teachers might say rooting into the floor, rooting your feet into the floor, and then building upwards. Nice tall posture. Hands can be open, sometimes maybe even raised up towards the sky. All right. We'll run through a sun salutation. Sun salutation is usually how classes begin. Inhale, arms sweep up. Exhale, forward fold. You fold in half, coming down towards the floor. Inhale, halfway lift. Hands come to shins, ears away from the shoulders. Exhale, forward fold. Hands frame the feet. Step the feet back into a plank. And we'll lower halfway down to the floor. That's called Chaturanga. Lowering halfway down, you keep the shoulders above the elbows, and then inhale to upward facing dog. Release the feet down towards the floor. You can have the knees on the floor, but you're working to bring them up off. Crown of the head reaching up for the sky, shoulders are relaxed. You don't want to go here and then arch the head. That puts a lot of pressure on the back. You want to be nice and tall, let the shoulders be away from the ears, and try to grow the crown of the head up. That's upward facing dog. Then you transition into downward facing dog. Curl the toes under, and then slowly let the hips pull you up and back into downward facing dog. The right distance for downward dog is kind of tricky. You're going to have to feel it out. Usually, if you can go right into a plank without moving anything and then back into downward dog, that's a good distance between your hands and your feet. In downward facing dog, I'll show you from the front. We'll start with the hands. You want to press the hands into the floor. Middle fingers are parallel. The rest of them are spreading out on your mat. You're pressing the fingertips and the pads of each hand. Fingertips, pads into the floor. And then to activate the shoulders a little bit, imagine you're turning a dial towards your pinky finger. Again, the hips are up and back. A lot of times you can modify it by pedaling one leg at a time. It's called walking your dog. Or maybe you bend both knees, sink that chest a little closer to the thighs, and then work to press the heels towards the floor. Head is hanging heavy between the arms. Big, expansive inhales. Long, slow exhales. All the breath going in and out of the nose. Usually from down dog in a sun salutation, you walk up towards the front of your space, coming into a forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. And then rise up. They might say into mountain pose or Tadasana. If they're speaking all Sanskrit, just leave the class. It's not worth it. And then come back down. Usually you'll run through at least 2 of those, so we'll do that again, kind of faster paced. You're starting usually towards the front of your mat. Inhale, arms sweep up. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Hands are on the shins, ears away from the shoulders, nice flat back, long spine. You could bring the hands down to the floor, but that kind of puts a little extra pressure onto the hamstrings. I like to start hands on the shins. And then forward fold again. Hands frame the feet, they step back into a plank. Run through Chaturanga, which is basically a half of a push-up. And then inhale, upward facing dog. Tops of the feet pressing into the earth, knees lifted, crown of the head reaching up. Exhale, downward facing dog. Curl the toes under, press those hips up and back. Exhale, walk up towards the front of your space, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. Big bend in the knees, inhale, rise up, arms sweep up overhead. Moving into chair pose. Pretty common after 2 sun salutations. Chair pose, I'll show you straight on first. I like to bring the big toes together and the big toe mounds together. Touch, put a little space between the heels, knees and thighs come together. Lower your hands down to the sides of the feet. That's how you find your depth. And then inhale the arms up overhead. This is a low squat. You're hanging out here, but the weight is going back. So you can lift up your toes, send the weight back into the heels and into the glutes and hamstrings. Arms are up overhead. squeezing all the things together in the legs. All of our muscles in our legs are all squeezing together. If for some reason you get into chair pose and your legs are apart, imagine you're ripping the mat apart with your feet. Stand up out of that. Shake out the legs if you need to. That can be pretty intense. Let's move down onto the floor. Child's pose. Child's pose, you bring the toes together behind you, pressing the tops of the feet into the earth. Sit the hips back onto the heels. Separate the knees as wide as you need. You can start narrow, but I like to start up a little bit wider so that my torso can fall down between the legs. Reach the arms out in front of you. Now you can make this as active or passive as you want. It could be a resting pose where you're just lying on the floor letting gravity win. Or if you want to make it active, come up onto those fingertips and actively pull the torso away from the hips like a tug of war is happening between your wrists and your hips. That's child's pose. Inhale up to a tabletop position. Tabletop is just hands beneath the shoulders, knees beneath the hips. Usually you'll run through some cat-cows here, all right? Inhaling up to cow pose. The head comes up, belly reaching for the floor. That puts the arch in the spine. Imagine you're pulling your hands back towards your knees here. Feel that stretch into the abdomen. And then move it to cat pose. Exhale, press the earth away, arching the spine. Let the head hang heavy between the arms. Inhale, cat, or cow, pardon me. Exhale, cat. Transition into downward dog. Step your hands up so you have that space that you need again. Imagine like you were starting in a plank. Find that distance between the hands and the feet. Curl the toes under, press the hips up and back. Downward facing dog. If they say three-legged dog, you would inhale one leg up towards the sky, keeping that bottom foot still on the floor. Your hands are still pressing into the earth. This is three-legged dog. Usually that's a precursor into another pose, like you step this leg up and then they'll say low lunge. Step the foot through between the hand, lower the knee down, untuck the toes, press the top of the foot into the earth. Inhale, that torso comes up. You can stay here. Sometimes it's here with the hands. Kind of depends on where the teacher is going with his or her class. This is low lunge. I'm going to stick to everything usually on one side, and you can kind of figure it out for the other side there. There's not much difference between the sides. Curl the toes under, lift that knee up, sweep the leg back. Maybe they say, let's do a vinyasa here. Vinyasa is another word for running through the Chaturanga, up dog to down dog. So sometimes the teacher will say, do a vinyasa, and all that means is you run through this three poses. Chaturanga, up dog, down dog. Let's try a high lunge or crescent lunge. Let's say they say, inhale the left leg up towards the sky for three-legged dog. Exhale, crescent lunge or high lunge. Step the foot through. The right foot stays where it is. And then inhale the arms up overhead. In this pose, you're squared up. The feet are hip-width distance. Your shoulders are relaxed away from the ears. I like to bring my hands a little bit closer together to put the shoulder in the socket. You might see some people like this. It's just putting pressure on the shoulder joint. You're stacked, balanced here. Options on that back leg in crescent lunge or high lunge. You can press into the heel, and that turns on the posterior muscle chain, or bring the ankle over the toes, and that switches to stretch into the quad hip flexor area. The knee, front knee, is always above or behind that front ankle. You rarely ever are out past it unless the hips are lower than the knee. So whenever we're in any of our standing poses, you want that front knee to be above or behind that front ankle. Warrior one. Let's say they have you going to warrior one. I'll run through all these from down dog. So warrior one, you step the left foot through between the hands, and then drop that back heel down. I'll show you from a straight on perspective. You drop that back heel down. Now, some people like to be on a balance beam for that, but it's not really good for your hips to do that. So what I would recommend is if they say warrior one, you step that foot through between the hands and then kick your right foot out a little bit so that you're on railroad tracks as opposed to a balance beam, but that back heel is down, toes are down at like a 45-degree angle. Inhale, the arms come up. Your goal in this pose is to work the hips, whoa, balance. Work the hips towards square, so we're actively pulling that back hip forward and the left hip coming back. Arms are in that same position as high lunge or crescent lunge. Shoulders, again, remember to relax the shoulders from the ears. To exit this, hands come down through heart center, frame the foot, sweep the leg back. Usually you'll run through a vinyasa just so you can get set up for the other side. Remember vinyasa, lowering down halfway, inhale, exhale. Warrior two. Imagine we're starting every one of these with a leg up in the air. It's just easier to get the leg through. So you're in a three-legged dog and they say warrior two. You step that foot through and then you drop the back heel down. This time we're on a balance beam and then you can cartwheel the hands up. Warrior two is a pretty intense pose. So let's start with the feet. On that back leg, you're pressing down through the outside edge of that foot. You should feel that turn on your glute. The front leg, again, knee is above or behind that front ankle, and it's opening up. So a lot of people do this. That front knee folds in. That's no good. Keep working to open that leg up. Imagine you peek down and you want to see your big toe. You're stacked on top of each other here in warrior two. Hips and shoulders, then you add the arms, right? You want to keep the arms kind of parallel, and you want to get the shoulders relaxed away from the ears. You can have the palms down or palms up, whatever feels best for you. Your gaze is either straight ahead or out over your front hand. Remember to keep that knee working its way open. A lot of times from here, you'll be cued into what's called reverse warrior. The reason why we press down at the outside of that foot is protect the glute, or turns on the glute, protects the hip. For a reverse warrior, you'd flip the front hand, inhale it up for the sky, and then relax the shoulders from the ears. I see a lot of people doing this. No good. Relax those shoulders from the ears. Important in reverse warrior, a lot of times people forget about that front knee and they let it fall in. So keep working to open it up and then sink into that lunge when you're in your reverse warrior. So let's say you're here in warrior two and the teacher says reverse warrior. It's just a flip of the hand, bring it up, reaching as far as you can, trying to get a nice stretch here in the side body, and then exhale, relax the shoulders from the ears, sink into that lunge. Arm, this back arm can go down the leg, just don't push into the knee. It can go behind for a little half bind, or you can just let it kind of hang out wherever you want to go with it. What else do we got? Ooh, extended side angle. Maybe you're in warrior two, maybe you're in reverse warrior, and they say extended side angle. The left elbow comes to the top of the knee, very little weight here, and then that right arm sweeps through. You can reach it straight out and try to get a long line of energy from the right fingertips to the outside edge of that right foot, or you can reach it up. Just kind of depends on what other folks are doing, what the instructor's doing in the class, the next pose they might be thinking about. And you're, again, little to no weight here, arm either reaching out overhead, still pressing down into the outside edge of that right foot. Front knee is above or behind that front ankle. Coming into a wide-legged fold. Turn the feet in. Now, I like to have the outside edges of my feet parallel. It kind of frees up some space in the SI joint in the back of the hips. However, if you're going to be moving into different poses, try to listen to the teacher's cues here on where they want your feet positioned, because sometimes you move out of this into a different pose and your feet might be in the wrong position. But a wide-legged fold is the same as a forward fold, except your feet are wider, your hips, you're just hinging over them, trying to bring the crown of the head towards the floor. This is an intense hamstring stretch here. So take your time getting into it. You don't need to just fall into it. Slowly lowering down. The common transition from this is into Garland Pose, or a yogi squat, or malasana if they're speaking in Sanskrit. And all that is heels are in, toes are out. You sink down, and you're just in a yogi squat here. The hips are below the knees here, and this is one of those occasions where the knees can be out past that front ankle, simply because most of the weight of the body is down in the hips. Hands are together here, pressing those knees apart. Try to get a nice long spine, nice and tall. And then lower down to the floor. Let's say they want to have you doing some ab work. Most teachers throw in some abs near the end of class. Boat pose is a very common one. Lots of different variations for boat pose. This is the most basic. You're just hinged back, right, like a V. Your feet are still on the floor. Hands can be behind the legs. Maybe you want to lift the feet up off the floor. Maybe you release the hands, palms facing up. Maybe you stretch those feet out long. But either way, wherever you're at, you can just stay here, 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 or here. All of these are boat pose. Let's move into some stretches on the floor. If they have you get into figure 4 or reclined pigeon, it's very simple. You take one foot, let's do the left ankle, place it on top of the right knee. Your left hand is going to go through that hole you just created, interlace your fingers around the hamstring or the shin, and then you pull that knee back for the armpit. Let the head rest on the floor, maybe a slight tuck of the chin to get some extra length out of the back of the neck. Option here to take this left elbow and press it into that thigh, get a little extra out of the left hip. A supine twist. So when you release that down to the floor, a lot of times the next pose is a supine twist. You can stack the knees next to each other or cross the leg over. I like to keep the spine in a straight line. So once you do that, kind of scoot your hips over the opposite direction of which way the knees are falling, just a few inches, and then lower the knees down to the floor. And then the other arm reaches, and you're just stuck in a twist here. Might be hard to see from this camera angle. Not really sure how to show it otherwise. The important part about this pose is big inhales and then slow exhales, and just try to relax. You're not doing any stretching. Let gravity do the work in a supine twist. Bring those knees back up towards center. Happy baby is a very common one, or Ananda Balasana if they're talking in Sanskrit. Elbows come to the insides of the knees. Hands go to the outsides of the feet, and you try to stack the ankle over the knee, pull the knee down for the armpit as we're working on bringing the whole spine onto the floor. So I'm trying to tuck my tailbone down towards the ground. Maybe a subtle rock side to side here, kind of massaging the spine. And lastly, Shavasana or corpse pose. They should cue you through this. If they don't, shame on them. Just lie down first of all. Let gravity win, right? Then you let the feet open, fall open. Hands are away from the sides of the body. All 10 fingernails trying to get onto the floor, palms facing up. Roll your shoulders up and then back down. Create a nice little platform for the heart. Maybe rock your head from side to side. Find a comfortable resting position for the head. And then just relax. Definitely take your Shavasana. If the class starts to end and people are leaving and the teacher is still cueing Shavasana, stick with it. That's the best pose. It kind of helps the nervous system calm down from all that and relaxes. And I think it's the best way to enjoy the full benefits of a yoga class. I hope that was helpful. If you need any other things, please just let me know. Have a great day.